one of the topics which we have to study, which is evolution. All right, so evolution is of course a big interesting topic in itself. I don't think I can do justice to this whole topic and the whole subject even in the time which is available to us, but let's get a feel and a glimpse of the Darwin theory and the origin of a species. So it is actually essential for us to, on one hand, know the latest technologies and tools and study biology and know the latest technologies, how it can influence biology. At the same time, lot of fundamental research happening at the developmental biology level or evolutionary biology level actually once in a while pays off. For example, just imagine all of a sudden H1N1 strain came, and we had no idea that this particular strain, how it's getting affecting individuals. People are all dying all over the world, and literally there was no information that how this virus came. Lot of evolutionary biologists, they keep studying evolution of different organisms, including viruses. And those evolutionary biologists were actually studying maybe the trace of what happens to different family of H and N viruses, and they realized that they do have lot of gene recombinations happening, and they make different strains. And as a result, maybe in a very short time, people were able to decode that what can be sequence of these viruses and what can be their origin, and then what could be the possible ways of preventing that particular one. So this is how your basic understanding for the systems over the period can actually help you to really understand some concepts. So H1N1, influenza, even HIV viruses, all of these are various examples in which way our studies of knowing these viruses over the period has really helped to save a lot of lives. So evolutionary concepts, they are major part of the modern biology and biotechnology experiments. So Darwin is of course one of the authority in the field who has made his theory, origin of species, which we will talk in detail. But before Darwin came and what he proposed the theories, the things which were known that in the Earth's ancient atmosphere, probably there has been many changes happened over the period, also in the Jurassic era, and that's where a lot of these dinosaurs and a lot of these trees died and then became fossil forms. And then we have understanding that many of these species having certain similarities, some characteristics which are common. A scientist Lamarck mentioned that inheritance of acquired characteristics. It means over the period, if certain giraffe, for its food habit, if it needs to climb up, probably it has a long neck because it needs to eat, and that the trees which are having very long overall branches and the leaves, and as a result, it has to really climb up, and therefore it has evolved over the period for that kind of acquired characteristic, which has resulted into the characteristics going into the inheritance. So that was the earlier understanding of our evolution and our for these systems. But then Darwin came and he studied these things in a very different manner, and he was kind of somebody who likes to observe the natural systems, and he in fact left his medical studies and focused mainly on the looking at different invertebrates, looking at different geological features of different organisms. And then fortunately he was offered to take a 5 years long sea trip to explore the sea expedition on a ship, HMS Beagle. And his job was actually to be a naturalist who will observe all these creatures and these different organisms which are present in those environments. All right, so his book was actually one of the most read, most sold book, Origin of Species. And if you look at just his journey, I think his the voyage, the sea trip has actually made huge impact on his observations for the nature, and then kind of based on those observations he was documenting, which he was kind of making from different islands while traveling, and those has resulted into this particular book, which is Origin of Species, where he put with a lot of evidences that how life would have evolved. So this became one of the most famous drawing which shows the tree of life, in which way it would have branched, and he first time envisioned that in which way branching pattern would have been used for the evolution to happen. So during his voyage of the Beagle, what is shown here is the map in which way he was traveling across different continents. Darwin collected various species of birds, insects, spiders, plants, etc. And then he was documenting those that in which environment they are more adapting. So what is actually leading them, a certain kind of a species, to have much more inclination to grow in that environment as compared to other. And looking at those, then he kind of wrote this book, Origin of a Species, in 1859, where he provided the evidences which is for the today's organisms, how they are descending from the ancestral species. And he proposed that through a process of natural selection which is happening. So to reach out to these conclusions, he had collected many of these organisms, as I mentioned. For example, he observed that in different Galapagos Island, in different birds species are there, and those birds, one of them is let's say cactus eater. So this is actually having different type of beak as compared to other bird, which is insect eater or the seed eater. So they are living in different islands and they have different beak behavior, and that's probably because their food habits require these kind of adaptation to happen. So, and that's why they're more naturally found in those kind of environment. So he made those observations very scientifically, he documented those and proposed that life diversity arose from these ancestral species by the process of natural selection, which was different view than the previous Lamarckism and other views which people were thinking that how the acquired inheritance may happen. And first time he actually published his work only after he realized that another scientist, Wallace, who is also working in the similar theme, and he is convinced with Darwin's idea, because Darwin's ideas were first time going to make huge changes in the previously known theories. So first time he proposed that evolution could occur by the natural selection process. So the natural selection is essentially a process where individuals having certain heritable traits. As I showed you in those Galapagos Islands, these birds having specific features, different type of beaks, and those were actually required for their food habits, in which way they can survive, and those traits could be actually heritable now for their survival, and further it is actually being carried in the next generation after reproduction, and therefore these traits are being inherited. So over the time the natural selection can increase a good match between the organism and in which environment they want to live and survive. If the environment changes or the individuals move to a new environment, probably adaptation has to happen. So natural selection may result into the adaptation to the new condition, and sometimes that may result into the new species formation. So these are the kind of his theory, which ideally said if you are able to adapt and move to the new situation, new environment, then that is the natural selection. You are able to adapt to the right condition. If you cannot, then you'll be wiped out. You'll be weed out from that particular population, and that's where the natural selection is going to favor those who are having superior ability of adaptation. Just showing you here a couple of examples, one for natural selection versus artificial selection. So natural selection here, it's different type of environment you can see for the related species of insects which are living there, but they can change the colors as per their environment and the shape in fact, and these are the natural selection. Whereas if you look at here, the cabbage and various type of broccoli etc. derived, they are from the wild mustard, but we are for our food habits, for our food requirements, we grow them in different environments, and different type of vegetables have been produced, which could be example of artificial selection. This is natural selection for the environment where one would like to adapt for their survival. This is artificially selected just for our requirements for the food and other practices. There are scientists who have been studying the gene behavior and their overall impact to the population and looked at the things in much more numerical ways. And these are known as Hardy-Weinberg law. So an allele and the genotype frequencies of an overall population will remain constant. So Hardy-Weinberg law is applicable if population is large, mating is random, there is no mutation as assumed, there is no gene flow and no natural selection. So things are very static. Now going back to your original example of red versus white genes for that flower characteristic, in this way the P and Q represent frequencies of two possible alleles for the red gene and the white gene here. Let's assume this one is 0.8 and this one is 0.2. So the Hardy-Weinberg law says P square plus 2PQ plus Q square is going to be 1 for all of these genes in the random population. So if you have one homozygous gene which is P square, another one is Q square, and heterozygote is 2pq. So, you can actually calculate overall gene frequencies, and the sum of the frequencies of the 3 genotypes has to be equal to 1. So, if a population is in the Hardy-Weinberg equilibrium and all the members actually mate randomly, so then you will have the genotype frequencies that will remain consistent in the population. Coming back to this particular example, please do try this yourself. Just imagine if the allele or the frequency here is 0.8 for the red and 0.2 for the white. If you do this cross here, again the Punnett square, you can see that the p square is going to be 0.64, q square going to be 0.04, and you have the pq which will be 0.32. So, this is something exactly what I have mentioned in my next slide, which you can actually calculate, and you can see that overall it will be 1. And like that, if you have been given certain the frequencies or certain type of allele behavior, you can look at in the Hardy-Weinberg equilibrium how you can calculate those genotypes. Another terminology which is relevant here in the context of evolution is convergent versus divergent evolution. So, convergent evolution is when we have similar traits, but they are found in the independent species growing in independent environments. For example, here you can see in Australia versus North America, the squirrels and the gliders, they are having similar traits. Now, divergent evolution is that there are certain traits which are common across different species, but they evolve into different type of properties. So, if you look at anatomically, all of these, whether it is from human, hand or cat or whale or bat, they look very similar in the anatomical way, but they have been adapted to do different activities, and therefore, something can be used for flying or for swimming or for various activity which we do, or even climbing up in the cat's case. So, these are divergent evolution examples. Let us now look into Hardy-Weinberg law in some more detail, refresh the concepts so as you can solve some analytical problems. Learning evolution at the genetics level, Hardy-Weinberg law, population genetics law. What are the key conditions for Hardy-Weinberg law? Let us review these 5 conditions for Hardy-Weinberg law. First, population must be very large. Second, population must be isolated from other population, so there is no migration. Third, there is no mutation. Fourth, random mating. Fifth, no natural selection. It means every individual has an equal chance of survival. The Hardy-Weinberg equation states that the frequency at which a specific genotype occurs can be expressed as a ratio. Genotype divided by total number of alleles in the population. Let us review this concept before performing analytical problems. Hardy-Weinberg equation p square plus 2pq plus q square equals 1. Also, p plus q equals to 1, where p is the frequency of dominant allele, q is the frequency of recessive allele, 2pq the frequency of heterozygous dominant genotype, p square is the frequency of homozygous dominant genotype, q square is the frequency of homozygous recessive genotype. Let us now solve some problems based on the Hardy-Weinberg law. You should try yourself first, but a TA will also guide you to show the solution. So, let us start now. There is a herd of zebras in the Maasai region of Africa. Assuming that this population is following the Hardy-Weinberg equilibrium, 49% of the zebras are homozygous dominant for a trait XX, the gene for which is present as 2 different alleles. What percentage will be homozygous recessive? 50%, 60%, 5% or 9%? In a city, the population that do not have freckles equal to 60%. Freckles are dominant traits and this indicates that 60% of the population is homozygous recessive. Then what is the percentage of recessive allele in the population? 100%, 60%, 20% or 35%? In a small group of mountain climbers, 10 people are there. 6 of them have a dominant trait of enhanced oxygen uptake. If the dominant allele frequency is 6, what recessive allele frequency is expected? 60%, 20%, 35% or 70%. So, in this way You can even integrate the concepts of biology like evolution into mathematical models and predict the genetic frequencies of a population. Learning key concepts of evolution on one hand will make you appreciate the fact that life began as a single cell, but manifested into such diversity. Additionally, by integrating key mathematical aspects, you may be able to predict traits and inheritance patterns